Speaking of the Beatles and the styles of music that you heard through them, you knew them. How aware do you think they were of what they were projecting? You heard their music and you automatically went to, hey, I hear traditional folk music here, I hear a lot of things. Were they aware of that? When you talked to them, did they say, oh yes, we listen to the same folk music that you did, plus we also listen to Elvis and everything else?
No, I think it was subconscious. I think it was all a blend of things that they'd heard, and they just went in there like a sponge, and they squeezed a sponge, and it all came out. I know they'd been a skiffle band, so they knew those. That's where they learned those folk music chord changes, and they'd heard Elvis and the Everly Brothers and all the people and they were big fans of Bob Dylan. So it was all mixed up into one thing.
Do you remember the first time you became aware of Bob Dylan?
Yeah, I was in the Village. It was probably 61, 62, somewhere in there. And I was at Gertie's Folk City, and we were all just doing hootenannies. I was in line to go up on stage, like maybe 10th or something like that, and Bob was on. And he was playing Woody Guthrie songs. He wasn't writing his own songs yet. And the thing that I found remarkable about him was that he was a folk singer, but when he finished a song, the little girls would squeal. And that was something that didn't happen. Usually guys with glasses would clap, if the folk singer played, but women didn't really relate to it. And they were relating to Bob. In '63, I was working in the Brill Building and writing songs for Bobby Darin. And I had to listen to the radio and write songs like what I heard out there. And the Beatles came out, and I just kind of put it together that folk and rock. I heard folk music in the Beatles, and I started taking traditional songs and souping them up with the Beatle beat, and I'd take it down to Greenwich Village and play it, and the folkies didn't like it. But the guy who owned the club, he loved it because it was drawing people in, like the tourists were coming in. And he put a sign outside that said Beatle imitations. I didn't like that. So that's when I went out to LA, and the Byrds kind of formed around that. And we recorded Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man. Dylan used to come to our rehearsals before we released Mr. Tambourine Man, before we finished the album. And I remember he and Bobby Newirth were listening to us rehearse one night, and he said, "What was that?" I said, "That's one of your songs." And he said, "Oh, I didn't recognize it." And Newirth said, "Man, you can dance to it. That's really cool." So they were around, and it was something in the air. I mean, they heard the Beatles and the Stones too. They wanted probably to get in on that. It was really a happening thing. And folk music had peaked and was on a decline. It had gone so commercial that it had become less interesting to the people who truly loved it. It was starting to become old hat. And so it was time for something new. And mixing it up with rock was a logical choice, a logical conclusion.